All right, today I'm joined by Larry Deutsch, CEO and co-founder of DVK. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, James, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, I'd love to really start off kind of background your career. Could you kind of give us the highlight reel? What were the big moments that really led to you starting your own agency with DVK?
Yeah, well, I hate to take you back to childhood, but it honestly begins there. I was blessed to grow up in a family business. So I learned what it meant to literally have your name on the door and what that trust and accountability meant from engaging with customers to doing the books to cleaning the floors, and everything in between. So I always had that entrepreneurial bug in me, but fast forward growing up in business, having a mother who was an amateur artist, I learned the beauty of art at an early age. And while I lack her artistic skills, I gained her passion. And I think for that, I've always been a convergence between commerce and creativity along the way. And but starting from a strategic place where coming out of grad school, I was fortunate to join a consulting firm here out of Chicago called Technomic that specialized in the restaurant and hospitality industry and had assignments that spanned everything from merger and acquisition to new product introductions to, industry segmentation. And like growing up in a family business, given a lot of responsibility at an early age, very much sink or swim, but having great mentors at the same time. Um, Found my passion to move to client side when one of my projects was announced in Ad Age a couple months after we delivered the assignment. So I was both proud to have been part of it at the onset, but also felt a little sense of loss that I wasn't part of the launch. So it was an aha moment for me early in life to go get some client side experience, which I did with both Kraft Foods and the Wrigley organization in new product development and brand management. So coming from a strategic place, coming from a brand management place, always having a very holistic perspective. But as I was managing agencies at the time, really found my love in the agency environment, in the pace and the diversity, and there was a heart that raced when I was engaging with my agency partners, and I was in their offices. And at that time, the industry was looking for account people who could lead strategically, not be order takers, could really elevate the capabilities beyond traditional advertising and marketing. And that convergence again was really right time, right place for me. And then fast forward, have had the honor of working for some of the most iconic agencies in the industry, like Ogilvy and Wonderman, Havas, as well as some independents. But in 2019, had the opportunity to once and for all scratch that itch to launch my own agency, and that opportunity presented itself with somebody who wanted to entrust their business with myself and asked me to build the team, which I did with two great partners, and thus became DVK. And here we are now, 7 years later, and enjoying the independence and the freedom to be our client's best partner and be a growth partner and do marketing in a way that we've always envisioned, and have been blessed to be trained in throughout our careers.
Amazing. I love it. You got early on experience of like being exposed to like family business and all that. Did you always have kind of an entrepreneurial bug did you feel like eventually you were going to start your own agency, or did it kind of happen, as a result of, meeting your two partners? You obviously came in together, but kind of was always something in the back of your mind that you were planning on or had a desire to start your own agency?
I would say it's a desire that evolved later in life. I needed the experience to be worthy of creating my own, right? And quite honestly, at a life stage, raising three beautiful children and not ready to take that risk to just jump, in feet first to a new venture without the security blanket, if you will, that those positions offered. And more than security, they really offered me career enrichment and advancement and experience that have steeled me to this day and that I look on favorably and palpably to this day. So I've worked for organizations where it was a lean organization. And even in organizations like a Kraft or a Wrigley, we were lean teams, right? We weren't working for the mothership Kraft or Wrigley. We were working for units or divisions. Same thing for the agencies. When you're working in an office, leading an office like Chicago, while that's a significant footprint, it's still relatively not small, but it's a microcosm, right, of the bigger global holding company. So throughout my career, I've been in entrepreneurial environments, but I'd say later in life, and people would approach me and say, "Why haven't you? When will you launch your own?" And while flattered by that, just not ready for it. And the opportunity, as I said, it was right time, right place in life and career. And I have no regrets for either waiting for that time and now jumping in feet first and loving every bit of it.
Absolutely. Had a great sales rep back in the day that always tell me everything's all about timing and relationships. And it sounded like you found the right time and the right relationships
It
to kind of start it
truly
off.
that's really that summarizes it perfectly. So that gentleman was spot on.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you've also spent time on the brand side and the agency side, which I imagine give you great insight in terms of kind of the working dynamics between the two. But what do you think you miss out on if you don't spend time on the brand side? Like some agency people who only spend time on the agency, what are they missing out on by like not having that brand experience? And what did you learn when you went to the brand side and then back to the agency about how agencies should provide strategic services to their brands?
Yeah, honestly, I don't think I would be where I am today or along the way without that experience. It's that firsthand experience of what does it truly mean to run a business, own a brand, work cross functionally across operations and research and development, finance, legal, not just marketing, and all the factors that you have to take into account to build, launch products, launch brands, manage them, all the dynamics. And through all of that is the object of the exercise of marketing is to drive growth. It's about driving the business, not just having a pretty package or a sexy ad or a piece of content. Those are all facets, of course. So I think that experience, and then the other piece that has really been an important, part of my DNA is collaboration. I invited my agencies in. I gave them access to everything that I could so they knew my business and my brand as well as anybody and could come back with great creative work or great strategic thought leadership and be truly part of the team, not a vendor. And if there's one thing I absolutely have pushed back on throughout my career is that notion of being a vendor. I despise that word. And I just have always operated as a partner and invested time and as well as energy into relationships. And maybe it wasn't always reciprocated, but I believe that was the best way to work. And the most meaningful relationships and the greatest work have been a result and an outcome of that collaboration. So that's the other piece of it, that team building and how do you operate as one, regardless of what the name is on the proverbial business card.
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially an agency brand relationship is you're working so closely, like the closest to an extension of your team or a coworker type of collaboration is that the partnership type of role and environment has to be there to really, I think, build trust and a longer term relationship to where you can really build something together. Because that's fundamentally what you're doing with an internal marketing team.
Yep, absolutely. It really is a game changer. It's the difference between the language I've adopted in my career is want to be transformational, not transactional. And that's not me alone. You can't be transformational alone. It takes a team to transform. And if you're operating in a transactional environment in business or life, it's not fulfilling, it's not meaningful, it's not sustainable, and I think we could apply that. I know I've applied that to everything from the friends and family. I'm proud to keep the relationships in business that I've enjoyed over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. Then on the other side, there's always this kind of ebb and flow of, I think, brands trying to decide do they bring things in house or do they work with agencies? I think, especially now, there's even more pressure of can we use different AI platforms or different technology to do more things in house? But what have you found that kind of the value position for agencies to the brand of why brands shouldn't try to bring marketing or advertising type of functions in house and they should continue to use agencies strategically in order to take their marketing, their branding, their advertising to the next level.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's more timely and essential today than ever. Anecdotally, I helped many in their personal kind of career search and explorations, as well as their personal brands, stories. Something I've just enjoyed giving back over the years, and I've encouraged many to explore those in-house relationships as an avenue, as a new path, because it's here to stay. It's growing. I will never, we're not going to go 180 degrees. I think agencies still have a vital role. And I think the most important thing is external perspective. There is, no matter how hard I think any in house person tries to keep an external eye on the marketplace, on culture, on consumers, you can't. It's just not physically possible. There are too many demands on the in-house teams that they are held accountable for rightly, that that's a 24/7 job as it is. So at a minimum, agencies are going to bring that external perspective, not only because we're liberated to have that view and, walk different halls, but we also have the benefit of exposure to different industries. One of the things I have really loved in marketing is how you can cross pollinate learning from different industries, from retail to financial services to healthcare, et cetera. And that learning and that application has not only been vital for bringing fresh thinking and new ideas, but also has been a conduit for people to think differentially about their careers. And I've seen that. I think I may have told you in one of our pre-calls, an aha moment for me is when I had the pleasure of working on the Taco Bell business back at Wonderman many years ago, when two executives virtually within the same week announced that they were leaving Taco Bell, one for Bank of America and the other for Wells Fargo. And it was like, wow, that is a pivot. But when you think about it, right, those industries are multi-unit retail. Banking is a multi-unit retail business as much as fast food is, and it was certainly back in the day. So I think that perspective, and then just the fresh, creative thinking. We are still a business of ideas, and no matter how much AI becomes to be essential and vital as a tool, it's not going to replace the creativity that comes with the teams coming together and having the not only the talent but the freedom to bring the ideas to a client that, let's face it, the market hasn't seen yet, right? That's, the team that came up with Just Do It. They have informed and inspired by an insight. And as much as Nike knew their business and their brand, it took an agency, like Wyden Kennedy to come up with a campaign like that. And that's still true. That's a universal fact, I think, no matter how technology or new structures like in-house grow.
Absolutely. I
And I
think
want to say,
another
I'm not saying that out of bias for the agency industry. I just think a pragmatic view, and I don't have an issue personally with the in-house trend or dynamic. In fact, we've worked very closely with many in-house organizations, and again, comes back to that collaboration and working as one. And together, we're smarter, and together we bring something to the table that results in great work and business results.
Yeah, and I think this has been a constant trend even pre-AI, dominance and technology advancements, is that there's always been different brands have different circumstances and different initiatives and goals, and that kind of changes the dynamic of what they bring in house versus what do they use support systems for out externally. But another interesting perspective I heard was that all these brands and large organizations are also trying to figure out how to use all of the automations and the tech capabilities within their standard primary business and operations. So if they're a healthcare business, they're trying to, how do we insert it into our healthcare, our operations? Or if you're a retail business, how do we insert it into our retail business? So it doesn't make a lot of sense to also then try to operationalize it into their marketing or advertising departments as well, because that's not even, they're still trying to figure out how to implement in their core business. And I think that's another element of it, is that they only can do they only can operationalize so much with all these different systems and organizations. And I've just found that there's skilled specialty still within the marketing advertising space that you're really tapping into, is that oftentimes it's a resource access, is that if the pool of talent for marketing and advertising is all concentrated in advertising agencies, marketing agencies, then that's where brands still need to go in order to access that talent pool. Because fundamentally, advertising and marketing is a service-based business made up of people operating based off their skill set and specialty. And I don't think that specialty has fully translated into being automated away yet or ever, for that matter. But I think that's kind of the still the unique access that a lot of brands still will get is that unique specialty service that they get from the agencies.
Absolutely. And again, I think we all have to be mindful of change. I've been a big proponent of change. I've embraced change throughout my career. Run to it as opposed to from it. I always like to say either you initiate change or it's going to initiate you. And I think no different than when, digital exploded and many of us were back in the day when that was a thing and was here to stay and needed to be embraced to what we're experiencing present day. And, let's face it, the marketing industry has a series of chapters and everything from P&G sponsoring soap operas to the latest influencer creating content, from the beaches of Cannes. It's always been a constant state of evolution. And if you embrace it and you apply it, but the through line through all of that is it's still a human endeavor. We still exist in what we call the professional services industry, consulting, legal, financial. You still want to entrust your brand, your business, your savings to a trusted advisor who's got your best interests and brings experience that's differential than your own. And it doesn't mean they're smarter than you. It just means that they're complementing you to achieve what you're looking to do with your business and your money. And that's I don't see that changing.
No, not at all. That's another thing I've heard is that the kind of lower level insights and perspectives that don't have as much impact on a business or an individual, people are going to be much more willing to use and access AI. But as you go up the skill set that's needed, you need more professional opinion because we know that it can still generate a lot of false or incorrect content or feedback,
Hmm.
and that you need the lens of a professional in order to understand what's right from what's wrong or what's good from what's bad. And I think that's really that through line. So it's like, I can't, if this AI platform has never created a business for me or created a marketing initiative, it can produce something that looks like it, but I don't know what's right from what's wrong unless I've done it before and I
Yeah,
know what's good versus bad. And I
yeah,
think that would be the big differentiator.
yeah. I'm sure we've all experimented. My learning has been that, when you toy around with AI to create, it will create something that just is lacking emotion or real empathy. And again, I'm not here to bash. I'm an AI pragmatist. I'm neither an optimist or a doomist. I think it will, it has an important place. But what I have found to be really missing is that heart, that humanity. It will bring you back ideas that are really just a regurgitation of what's already out there in the ether, and restate the strategy. And that's great. Creativity doesn't restate the strategy. It comes, it builds off of a genuine human insight and emotion, and gets brands up on that emotional benefit ladder. So I think again, these are all things that you can use it to as a tool. I do subscribe to the notion that AI won't take your job, but somebody who's using AI, it will. And again, you're wise to embrace it and foolish to, stick your head in the sand.
Yeah, I think not using it's going to be equivalent of like a graphic designer continue to hand draw everything and then competing against somebody who's using Photoshop and Illustrator. It's just like
Absolutely. Yeah.
the amount of output you're going to be able to get by using the technology, which is a tool to do things better, faster, and cheaper, you're going to get 10 times better outcomes or results, or at least speed is going to be, improved a lot. But it's still going to take that human intuition to know what is strategically, what do we need to do, what needs to be done, and how do we use the tool to get it done better and faster.
Absolutely.
A big part of your guys' business, you guys kind of really focus on is being bold. Like you can see it in your background right now.
Yes.
Could you kind of share with us, like, what does that mean? How does that show up for your clients? Like, how do you operationalize being bold?
Yeah. Thank you. And we like to say that it's not about being loud or arrogant or braggadocious. It's helping the brand basically be as courageous as possible in the marketplace to assert its brand position in the boldest way possible. And one person's wild is another person's mild. So it's case by case, but it really builds on what we've talked about so far, James. Is bringing them a perspective from the outside about their brand that maybe they wouldn't have, arrived at themselves. And one of the greatest compliments we've received in our work is a very dear client, actually one of our first clients, who shared that they never thought they were already proud of their brand and very much loyal to their organization, but never thought they could be as proud for their brand as they were when we brought new work to them and a new creative point of view. And we're not just about here to tell stories, we're here to tell the truth, right? Be authentic. So it's just really working with each brand on a case by case basis to really understand what is what is their genuine purpose, whether they've articulated or not. And we work with those who have a stated purpose or those who we help them to be more purpose driven, and really elevate the brand to a place that they where it manifests most, to be honest, is brands that are still operating at a functional place on that benefit ladder. They're operating based on attributes and functional benefits. And we can help them rise up to be bolder by really becoming more emotionally engaged and having more insight about their target and recognizing that they can position their brand to engage that way, to position to go to market that way. And that's really where it shows up. And again, each one is case by case, depending where each brand is on the continuum. And we work brands that are Fortune 500 brands that are known and established, and you'd recognize, and you could say to yourself as a consumer, I know that brand. And brands that are more mid market who have probably been more sales led and are ready to become more marketing led and are ready to promote their brand to go to market in a way that is bolder, is differential, in ways they haven't thought of, and not again because we're smarter. We've had the pleasure of doing it together to arrive at and collaborate at a point of view about that brand that comes back to that one client in particular that engenders trust and pride, and gets them to a place that, because maybe they've been operating from an internal perspective, together we bring our perspectives to arrive at something that's stronger and is going to break through in the marketplace, because we know we live in such a attention deficit disordered world.
Yeah. Absolutely. We see it constantly in the paid media space is that attention span isn't always there, and capturing attention and holding it is kind of the first goal of a lot of advertising. But I'm curious, what have you seen different in terms of approach that your enterprise, you've worked with a lot of like enterprise Fortune 500 clients, mentioned Taco Bell, and you've worked with Chevron and Boeing and
Yeah.
P&G and a lot of those. And then you've also worked with medium-sized businesses. What have you seen the difference in terms of like kind of how they approach what the opportunity is for those different types of businesses? Just something that I've seen, at least from my experience from the paid media space, is that the larger brands have a lot bigger emphasis on their brand and brand associations and branding and advertising. And the small to medium sized businesses are very performance marketing driven.
Hmm.
And then I
Yeah.
think the downside though of that is that they end up not focusing on their brand, and they don't have any runway in terms of having a growing brand that kind of has compound growth over time. And they
Hmm.
just continue to operate in the month to month. How do
Yeah.
we survive month to month? But
Mhm.
from your experience, like what have you seen the differences in terms of approach with their branding?
Yeah, I love this question. I love the opportunity. It's about calibration, right? It's how do you take all the best practices that we've gained over the years, the experience we've gained for the quote unquote big guys, and apply it to challenger brands or to mid market? Personally, again, something that I'm really enjoying as part of DVK is having the honor of doing that and bringing all that experience. And I think that's a large part of why we engaged the way we are, is they know we have all that experience, but we show them we know you are different, size, scale, budget, but you can still go to market with the same principles, right? Having a differentiated brand, making sure that you have a solid positioning to be the foundation. Oftentimes they just lack that, because they've gone to market on a product driven way, in a sales driven way, not necessarily a brand or marketing driven way. And just showing who are my constituents, starting from the inside out, oftentimes not forgetting about their employees are an important part of this conversation. And how do we make sure that they're actively engaged in the brand? But really demonstrating that you don't have to be P&G, you don't have to be Citibank, you don't have to be Boeing to go to market this way. And a lot of that just comes in our own engagement to demystify marketing, to simplify it, because that's the other thing too is these organizations, they're smart, they're driven, they have a bold ambition, but for them, maybe marketing has been complicated or has been, promoted in such a way that is hard for them to embrace, and operationalize. So I think just customizing the approach, understanding where are they at on their life stage, on their journey, and as opposed to us force fitting a model on them because, well, that's the way we did it with P&G. It's like, no, you can have all the benefits. I reminded many years ago when I did a lot of work in the experiential space and had the honor of working with Jack Morton. It's one of the leaders in the industry. And, people would come to us and they say, well, Jack Morton was known for its Olympics work, right? And they say, well, this event, this meeting isn't the Olympics. And we would say, no, but it's your Olympics, right? This is, you need to win. You've trained for this moment, and you can use all the analogies. So just recognizing that the opportunity, whether it's a product launch or a customer engagement, B2B or B2C, is the most important business agenda they have, the business challenge or opportunity they have, and what's marketing going to do to help them win in that moment, in that season, that year. So I think that's really at the heart of it, and being really pragmatic about their culture.
Mm.
Again, for some organizations, I'll call it a cynical view of marketing. And we've engaged with those organizations and candidly kind of geek out and enjoy helping, again, demystify marketing and make marketing more of a shared growth driver as opposed to a silo, and making it relevant to all and inclusive of all, as opposed to, well, that's what the marketing guys do, and we've got to focus on our function or our department. We've seen that. So I
Sure.
think just being really tuned in and empathetic to their culture, and where are they at, and then how, again, what does their version of bold look like? And for some, it may be baby steps, and for others, it's like, no, they're ready to take a big leap because they're culturally there. And I'll end that answer with, oftentimes it's driven by, they maybe have brought in a marketing leader who brings that experience from big CPG or big agency, and you have a kindred spirit that they know what great looks like, and then together we can calibrate that together.
Yeah, that's when you can really grow something right. Is when, yeah, you have an internal stakeholder that's also aligned with kind of the vision and the goal and all that. But I'm also curious from your experience, what have you seen as like what's the foundation of branding and brand strategy that has been consistent over the years that really hasn't fundamentally changed? And is there anything you see that's new or different now about brand strategy that maybe you weren't doing previously 5, 10 years ago?
I'll be honest, I don't think it's changed at all. I think you hate to say that, right? Because we live in so much change, but I think the fundamentals of branding and brand strategy are still the same. I've just participated in a brand strategy session for a professional services firm with their in-house consultants to really demonstrate to them the role that branding can have in their business, and it was met with great and positive response. So for many, it's just, if you don't have a brand position, right? I mean, if you don't have, who am I right for? Who's my target? What's my frame of reference? What are my points of difference? If you haven't gone through that rigor to answer those questions, then you're operating on shaky ground. It's just one of the tenets. If you haven't explored the benefit ladder, as we talked about, and elevating up that ladder to a more emotional place from a functional place. And what's kind of common today wasn't so much maybe it has been maybe the biggest source of change when it comes to branding is the role of purpose, right? And what does it mean to be more purpose driven and values driven? So relative to the timeline of marketing and advertising, perhaps the biggest change in branding has been the role of purpose. Simon Sinek's leading with the why. Today feels very common, but I think relative to your question might be one of the newest things that maybe earlier in my career wasn't part of the plan, part of the process, I should say. But it's been around for a while now. I always cite Dove's campaign for real beauty as the first seminal, purpose-driven campaign that I didn't have any part of, but I've often cited in my work as like one of the gold standards for what does it mean. And that's, that case now is, decades old. So that's kind of I think the progression, if you will.
Yeah, do you see that also, like, off of the a lot of brands, especially recently? I feel like Tom's shoes maybe might have been, like, the biggest one that really pushed this out was, like, the donation, charitable giving effort that underlines that 1% to the planet or be it 5% to this charity or those initiatives. Does that kind of align or wrap under the kinda more purpose-driven organizational branding approach?
Absolutely, and to me,
Yeah,
the highest point is what Patagonia has done, where they've
yeah,
devoted all their profits to sustainability and the environment and really led, and again, to our point about what does it mean to be bold, they're not loud or braggadocious about that. They're actually kind of quiet and somewhat less, they're public about it, but not in an ego-driven way. And I would just say anecdotally, I think what's changed most in branding is the role of content, the role of creators, the putting your brand in the hands and trusting your brand with others.
mm,
We like to say that, branding isn't what you have to say about yourself, it's what others say about you. So, which gets more into activation than strategy. So, just to kind of unpack the question a little bit, and certainly not to ignore that there's been plenty of change from an activation standpoint for sure. And I think that's where some of the greatest has been. I know it's as they're talking about Canvas Week, that the focus is shifting more to the creator community and the role of influencers, which is certainly not new news at this year's Can, but it's certainly relative to the decades that we've all been in the business. It's a relatively newer chapter for sure.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I really look at those as more tactics, right? Those are
Yes,
like tactic is like
right.
how do you use a creator or content in a way to have your brand associated with something or someone or a feeling or emotion. I live in only the tactic world of being in the media buying space. There's strategy within the tactic that you can
Hmm.
explore of like where do you position your brand or where do you reach your audience? There's strategy in that, but fundamentally that's a tactic of how
Yeah.
your brand is active
Yep.
into the marketplace,
Absolutely.
but
Yeah.
and not a brand strategy. Whereas I think a lot of your brands and marketers do get those things confused sometimes. Is they confuse tactics with a brand strategy. Have you experienced that? And what's the kind of challenge with kind of getting brands back on board? Of no, this is your fundamental foundation. Your brand has to be built on. This is your strategy. Those are tactics. We need to line things up accordingly because I feel like some people skip ahead of the strategy and just think about tactics.
Yeah. Yeah. I call it tactics in search of a strategy.
Yes.
And we've all faced it, right? I'm sure everyone who will ultimately view this, hopefully, the folks you engage with, we've all been faced with a question from a prospective client about, I want to go viral. Back when virality became a thing and flash mobs, and everybody was looking for that tactic as opposed to, and again, not doing the work to have a solid brand positioning and, what's the universal insight or the universal truth that's going to really, drive the creative idea, that one thing, if you will. So yeah, we're faced with it not as much as maybe we used to, but we certainly, I think we all come across it at various times in our respective journeys. And I think you just have an honest, thoughtful, respectful conversation. Gets back to kind of understanding that audience, that they're not stupid, it's just somebody needs to have an honest conversation. It's like, I hear you, and I hear that, and I understand that desire, that intent. Let's step back a minute and talk about maybe some things we need to think about first before we go there. And I think when you do that and you position that in their best interests, it's a collaborative, respectful conversation as opposed to something that becomes confrontational or less than positive.
Absolutely. Uh, just go to more to your agency of in our previous conversation, you really talked about you really built the agency off of referrals and connections, your network and everything. How have is that how would you recommend other agencies kind of go about of building agency and growing operationally off of referrals? Does it start really with doing good work, building good relationships and fostering those, or what's been your experience with really kind of growing through that model?
Yeah, I think it's yes and. For starters, being independent, having my own firm, and being at a life stage, quite honestly, where for my partners and I, it's about quality, not quantity. So we're not selling. I always really rebelled. I came at the industry from consulting, and I always took a consultative position, and candidly found it somewhat frustrating when clients perceived that I was selling. When I was really trying to lead with their best interests at heart and arrive at something together. But I understand because you're kind of guilty of the company you keep. You work for a big holding company. It's not your name on the door. They know the reality you're working for somebody else. And I think there is a lot of selling in the industry. There is a lot of revenue grab. And I personally resisted that. I actually got cited by a former CEO for passing up on business and referring it to a partner agency. And I got called on the carpet for it. But we had a good conversation about it, and I explained where I was coming from. I certainly wasn't trying to be disrespectful to my firm, but I just truly believed in my heart of hearts we weren't the right fit. So it starts from that place that one, at a stage in life where being more conversational and having conversations like this. And if we don't ever do any business together, that's okay. Got to know you, got to learn more about you, got to learn something new. I may get a phone call. In fact, shortly after you and I met, I regrouped, reconnected with some industry friends, and I was telling them about you and saying that given the work your firm does, you might be a good fit for them. So I think it's just, again, entering into the conversation without a transactional bone and just doing what's right and being able to embrace work that's a good fit, say no to work that isn't, refer it to others is certainly just a mindset, and operate, I think, with that confidence that, as Michael Jordan used to say, let the game come to you, right? I think second is collaboration. And I think that the silver or bronze lining of unfortunately COVID was that I think it fostered a degree of collaboration and community because we were all set behind our screens and there's a lack of social and industry engagement, and I think it just opened up people's minds to we're kind of all in this together. So we've enjoyed really nice collaborative relationships with both large and small firms that we maintain in anticipation that there might be a need or just in preparation. The needs aren't always there, so it's just being prepared. But that collaboration and that sharing of experience, sharing of clients, being very transparent. Our model is we build custom teams, and if there's anything outside of the work my partners and I can't do, I would say we do 80 to 90 to 100% of the work, depending on the situation. But when there is a need for media buying or production or experiential, anything that is beyond our capability or capacity, we're really transparent with our clients. We've identified James and his team or these partners, and here's why. And one of the things I'm particularly proud of, when my partners and I first came together, the first thing we literally said, even before we came up with our name, was we said, we're going to work with good people, and we're not going to chase revenue, and we're not going to put ourselves in situations that are disrespectful, or with client or partners. And we've really held to that. So I think being collaborative, having an open source and being transparent, because I think historically, I'll end with this, that I think the industry has been guilty of trying to either be all things to all people or fake it
Mhm.
till you make it.
Right.
And I think if you kind of dispense with that and you just say, this is what we're really great at and who we're right for, and this is what we need to complete us or to service the opportunity or to hand it off and refer it, then there's nothing but good that comes out of that. And if you take a long-term view, it's healthy and not only for mind, but for business.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the best parts of creating your agency is that you get to build it the way you want. And that's really what you three started with is like, how do we build the agency that we want to work in with the people we want to work in and continue to operate in that way, which I think is one of the best parts. Last question for you.
Mhm.
One piece of advice to your younger self when you're starting your career, what would it be?
Boy, that passion is both a strength and a weakness. And I learned that the good way and the hard way. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today if I wasn't passionate. I've been passionate about marketing throughout my career. I knew at an early age it's what I wanted to do, and I'm enjoying it as much today as I did when I first embarked on this journey. I'm passionate about a lot of things. I'm passionate about change. I'm passionate about collaboration. I'm passionate about winning, but not at all costs, winning for the right reasons. And, when it comes to change in particular, I learned that, change is hard for people. And I've been hired in a number of instances where they wanted change and they wanted to move beyond their current state. And that was really rewarding. And that I was honored to be that guy. But you got to be empathetic to the fact that For a lot of people, change is hard. Change is scary. Change means a sense of loss. And when you're passionate about something, you just have to be cognizant that some people could read that the wrong way, or I could deliver it the wrong way, and deliver it in a way that isn't belies my intentions. As I like to say, it takes a sender and a receiver. So I would say that if I had to isolate one thing, it would be that. And I think I hopefully have gotten smarter and wiser and mellower with age. But I haven't lost my passion, because I've always said the day I don't enjoy what I do and who I do it with is the day I stop or move on. And I think you got to love what you do. And I think I joked with you, if I really got to do what I love, I'd be, bringing the ball up the court for the Bulls, or puck up the ice for the Blackhawks, or maybe at least somewhere in the band with Springsteen. But since I lack any of the talent that requires those, business and marketing has been where I've applied my career passion, and it's served me well. So just recognizing that how that manifests externally to your colleagues and partners is something that I would tell my younger self.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you so much sharing all the wisdom, knowledge. It's been great to get to know you. Appreciate you.
Thank you, James. Thanks for the time and for the content you're creating. It's really really good stuff.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Have a good one.
You too.